All right, look, all about this particular chapter is all about groups and group activity. Okay, and I want to give you an example of how groups can be powerful. But real quick, somebody remind me, what is an interest group in general? All right, it's a group of like-minded people who want to affect government or policy. Okay, and the example that I give people in terms of the group's ability to do something, teachers. Okay, 2 years ago, y'all remember the teachers strike? Oh yeah, it's a good time for you all. Y'all got 2 weeks off. All right. You're like, we'll take that. We support the strike. And teachers, every day at the Capitol, you had about 7,000 teachers every day who are cramming the Capitol, and there's an overflow crowd waiting to get outside. And it's absolutely bananas. They're yelling and chanting in there. And I have to admit, it is a little fun. I mean, like it gets on your nerves too, but you're like, oh wow, we're getting something accomplished here. So the teacher strike's going on and it ends after 2 weeks and we largely get what we wanted. However, what would have happened? Like, let me ask you this: did all teachers participate in the teacher strike? No. Okay, and believe me, that can cause, like, I know some people who take that very personally. All right, but with over 20,000 teachers and employees in the school system here in West Virginia, what would have happened if we'd had 15 or 20,000 show up at the Capitol every day? It probably would have got done a lot faster, okay? Because those members of the state legislature, especially the ones that weren't voting for us, they were feeling the heat, all right? And believe me, they couldn't get anything else done because we were just kind of gumming up the works, all right? Now, maybe you don't like that tactic and you're like, oh, you teachers are awful, all right? But you do what you got to do sometimes, okay? Now, that aside, you can see the power of groups, the effectiveness of a large group of people. There's the old adage that there's strength in numbers, and that is undeniably true. All right. And the last thing we mentioned the other day that is of importance to us is that most groups start as a result of a social movement of some type of need. Like, for example, these people, environmentalists, they saw a need. What was happening in the environment that environmentalists felt like they had to intervene? Trees were being cut down at exorbitant rates without regard to the environment because, fun fact, sometimes it takes a while for trees to grow back. Okay? And what else is happening in the environment? Pollution. Have you ever heard of the Cuyahoga River? It's in Ohio. It caught on fire more than once. All right. It was so polluted with chemicals and oils that it literally became more of that than it was the water, and the surface of the river was on fire. Isn't that great? And people were like, you know what? Maybe we need some regulations about what we're allowed to dump in the water. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Okay, and so they got in the way of that, and so groups formed like the Sierra Club that wanted to protect the environment. That said, look, we want to change the government rules, and are there rules in place about what you can do in the environment now? Like here's a simple one. What happens if you litter? You get fined if you get caught littering or dumping garbage or doing things like, for example, what can you not burn out in your trash pile or well, you can't burn trash, but what's something that you're really getting in trouble for burning? Plastic or tires, rubber, all right? And you know when somebody's burning rubber literally because you can smell it from a mile away, all right? And people think they're like, oh, what's the big deal if I just do it? And they're like, yeah, that's the problem. Everybody thinks it's just them doing it, and it's not. Okay? So groups are always on the lookout here. All right? Women. Have women ever been the victim of poor government policy? Without a doubt. What are things that women have had to work to change? Voting rights. It's been 100 years since women got the right to vote. All right? What is it? Equal pay. There's been legislation passed in 1963, the Equal Pay Act, and in 2009, the Obama administration allowed something called the Lilly Ledbetter Act, which says not only are there punishments, legal punishments against people if they don't pay you the same for equal work, but you can sue them as well. You're like, oh man, that's exciting. All right. What else? What are women? What is it? What's the pink tax? Feminine hygiene products are taxed, and women are like, they shouldn't be taxed because these are things that are necessities. All right. And, a lot of people are with them on that. Let's go even further here. What's the big issue that women are right now actively trying to, they think they have to protect? Abortion. Okay. And it's really interesting the way that both sides frame that issue. They're like, it's reproductive rights, that I should have autonomy over my body. Okay. And I'm not, you can fall on either side of that issue that you want to. But what I'm saying is that women are working to try to change policy. One that you even forgot about that probably affects you in ways you don't realize, Title IX. Anybody familiar with Title IX? Title IX of the Education Act basically says that whatever opportunities, educational opportunities you give boys, you have to give girls. And the meaning of it was like there was actually a time where girls were dissuaded from taking like math or science because they thought girls weren't interested in that. All right. Yes, things of that nature. But one of the biggest practical effects is in sports and extracurriculars. Girls' sports didn't really exist the way we know it because a lot of times they didn't have money for it. And now, what do we make other sports do? Give up some of their money to protect that and fund these programs. Even at the college level, you have to provide an equal number of scholarships for men's and women's sports. All right. And sometimes that's really difficult. Okay. Now let's go on and we're going to talk about Federalist number 10, but not today. Okay. We're probably going to get that Monday. I want to get to some other things first. The real question is, how much impact do groups have over government and policy? If that's their goal, how much of an impact do they actually have? And there are three different theories about how much impact groups have. And the first theory is what we call the pluralist theory. Okay, it's the most popular of the three theories. Right? The pluralist theory says or suggests that there are so many groups in the country that no one group would ever dominate or have too much influence over the others or over the government. So, for example, like with the environmental groups, okay, you got a bunch of different environmental groups. You also, like, for example, have coal companies, oil companies who probably want to have a say on environmental issues. And they want to see the government act in a certain way. And sometimes they're contrary to each other. And so the pluralist theory says, look, when you get all these groups together, everybody gets their say and we can hammer out a good, decent policy. All right? I know, we hear the band outside. Pluralist theory suggests that no one group can ever have too much influence over the government because there's so many other groups they have to compete with. Right? Now, that's one theory, but not everybody subscribes to that theory. Okay? The really cynical people, and do we have any cynical people in here? Quinlan, one of them, Kate, you're one of them too. Kate, I feel like you would definitely buy into this. Some people believe in what's called the elite theory. Okay? The elite theory says, yeah, there's a bunch of groups out there, but only a handful of groups have any real influence over the government. Okay? Only a handful of groups have any real influence over the government. That's the elite theory. What do you think that people who believe in the elite theory, what thing do you think distinguishes the really important groups from the really not ones? Money. That's right. Okay. Remember, everything relates to money. Quinlan, question, comment? I haven't seen it, but I know that that's true. That when there is money behind an issue, things get done a lot faster. An example I gave the other day, and I don't know if I used this one on the video from the other day, but do you all remember what happened in 2010 in Connecticut at Sandy Hook? Yeah, a shooting of elementary kids. Okay, now here's how powerful groups can be. All right, after that shooting, you got kindergartners and first graders who get murdered in their school, and a couple of teachers also. And people obviously were calling for changes to gun policy. All right. And Senator Joe Manchin from here in West Virginia worked with a senator in Pennsylvania, a Republican, Pat Toomey, and they came up with a suggestion that they thought everybody would be on board with. And the suggestion was, as a law, we would pass a law that would require universal background checks, meaning that if you purchased a gun anywhere in the country, you would have to go undergo a background check. All right. Now, to make sure that this law was popular among the people, they did a poll, and 90% of Americans said that they thought that that law was a good idea, that they should follow through and pass it, and it never got passed. Why not? The National Rifle Association used a lot of their resources and connections to make sure that bill got nowhere, even though 90% of Americans thought it was a good idea, right? That's how powerful groups can be. And people who are elite theory people would say, yeah, the NRA's got a lot of money and they got a lot of members, and all they give a crap about is gun rights. Okay? Anybody else thinking you're an elite theory person? You're like, yeah, I don't trust those people. All right. Third theory, the hyperpluralist theory. We've gone from pluralist to hyperpluralist. Question for you, and this will help you understand the hyperpluralist theory. Has anybody here ever had to take care of a toddler before? All right. And have you ever had to take care of multiple toddlers? All right. When you're taking care of multiple toddlers, it's insane. First of all, can you get anything done in your own life? No, because they require constant attention. And it's like you got one little kid over here who's like, he threw juice on me. And then another little kid's like, yeah, I need to go to the bathroom. And then another little kid is over there in the corner writing on the wall with crayons, right? You can't get anything done, right? It's awkward. Now, that is a way to describe the hyperpluralist theory, because the hyperpluralist theory suggests that because there are so many groups in the country and they all want the government's attention, the government can't get anything done. All right? They're like, hey, there's a bunch of different groups and the government can't get anything done because they're too busy trying to make these groups happy. When I go visit my family, my mom or my dad, I know my nephews are going to be up there. And I take my suitcase or my briefcase with me with my work in it, but I know I'm never going to get anything done while they're there because my nephew just wants to play. And he doesn't like it if I'm doing any type of work because he wants to play. All right. That's the hyperpluralist theory. The idea that there are a lot of groups in the country, but no one particular group, because they're all bugging the crap out of the government can't make any good policy. Curses. Okay. Let's talk about types of interest group now. We got to shift gears a little bit. Okay. There are different types of groups out there, and most of them are economic based. Okay. Most of them are going to be economic based. Remember, there's always a money angle. Okay? There's always a money angle. And economic groups, people don't realize it, but large-scale businesses count as an interest group. Here's one example, AT&T. Okay? Don't blah. AT&T is a good company. That's an American company, sir. All right? Now, does AT&T care about what laws the government passes? What type of laws? What is it? Yeah. Can you be more specific? What is it? Yeah, be more specific. What types of business? What type of commerce? Telecommunications. That's a good word. All right. Now, here's an example. What is it? There's been a conspiracy theory going out over the last year that some people in Congress actually believe that AT&T is trying to explain that this is not a threat to society. 5G cell towers. All right. People are like 5G caused cancers. They think I'm not joking. Look it up. You Google it sometime, and there are all these articles, these conspiracy theories that think in particular that 5G cell towers are going to cause cancer, or that Bill Gates is going to somehow communicate with AT&T and Microsoft, and they're going to take over the world this way, and it's a mind control experiment. Okay? Probably. Okay? Now, AT&T says, look, we can't let anything get in the way of this because these 5G towers are going to make us a crap ton of money, right? High-speed internet directly to your phone, okay? AT&T, do you think that they care about government policy? 100%, all right? Of course, any business would care about tax laws. How about this? Would a business care about the Affordable Care Act? Why? They have to provide health insurance to their employees. Okay? So sometimes it's outside your field. Take a look at this. Here's Apple. Do they care about government policy? Oh yeah. Their devices like your iPhone or even a laptop or iPad or anything else, anything that transmits a wireless or a radio signal or communicates wirelessly, it has to follow government regulations. Okay. Uh, Fun fact too, for a long time they used to think cell phones, like if you held them up to your ear too long, it would cause cancer. All right. Question. Yes, foreign trade policies, like for example, what's something that President Trump's administration, rightly or wrongly, what do they do with China? They put a lot of tariffs in place, okay? And a lot of American businesses said, look, don't do that because how will China respond? They put tariffs on our stuff, all right? And that slows down trade and everybody loses, all right? And Apple was one of them. Here's another example, too. Do you know what Apple really wants? You all mentioned China. Do you know what Apple really wants America to do to China? They're pressuring them about patent laws because what China will do sometimes is try to rip off Apple's technology and sell like a knockoff iPhone using their designs. All right. And intellectual law and patents, Apple's upset because they're like, hey, they're stealing our stuff and making money over it. American government, what are you going to do about that? Okay. So look, businesses are constantly trying to get stuff done. ExxonMobil, what do they sell? Gasoline, oil, oil refineries and gasoline. Okay. Is that a money making thing? Oh, yeah. Now, you all might be old enough to remember this, but 2011, what happens off the Gulf of Mexico? Yeah, BP oil spill. All right, they're drilling for oil offshore into the Gulf there. Okay, and if you don't know, they have drills that would go down under the water and basically penetrate the ocean floor and get oil out and extract it, and that's great. Except if there's an accident, where's all that oil going? Into the ocean, and it happens on a BP rig, and it completely pollutes the Gulf of Mexico. The cleanup is ridiculous. You kill the wildlife, the fish there. That messes with the fishing industry. It messes with tourism industry, and you got big problems. What does the government immediately start thinking about doing? Not just punishing them, but changing laws about offshore drilling. All right, and that doesn't just affect BP because Exxon's like, way to mess things up for all of us. Okay. And so, believe me, Exxon and other gasoline companies were like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. This was an accident. It was a one off. Yes, it does. Okay. Now, General Motors, another good example. What do they produce? Automobiles. Motors, too. You're like, oh, very clever. All right. GM, they produce automobiles. Does the government have regulations about how automobiles have to be built? What does every car, Bailey, what does every car have to have in it? The government says you have to have this for safety purposes. Seatbelts, airbags too. You're like, there's a bunch of things. But look, ultimately, the government had to put specific laws in place saying you must have seatbelts. Okay. And you guys, look, you don't understand. Back in the day, you had seatbelts, but they didn't cover everybody because, like, they used to have what was called a bench seat in the front, where it's just like a big flat seat that went all the way across the car. And like, if my parents were just taking me or one of my brothers somewhere, they put us in the front seat. And my mom's idea of a seatbelt was just putting her arm out in front of me if like the car had to brake suddenly. Okay, and like people are like, that's no big deal. Yeah, it'll be all right. Now, something else they found out too about cars in the '60s. A guy named Ralph Nader wrote a book called "Unsafe at Any Speed," and he did a study along with scientific data to back it up that a lot of the automobiles were basically not at all safe, and that any car accident, even at low speeds, would cause severe damage to the car and endanger people's lives. And do you think GM? Do you think they wanted people reading that book? No, because the government said maybe we need to change what we're doing and create some standards here. GM and Chrysler and Ford, the three major auto manufacturers, do you think They just let that happen. No, they fought it tooth and nail. Or, for example, how about tobacco companies? Look, tobacco companies have fought a number of things over time, including commercials. Like, for example, people don't realize that you can't put tobacco commercials on television. And the government also put a regulation in place. When I was a kid, anybody ever heard of the character Joe Camel? Camel Cigarettes had a character named Joe Camel, and he'd always wear his black leather jacket and sunglasses, and he's always smoking a cigarette. And they're like, hey, you're marketing that to kids on purpose. Right? And Camel and other tobacco companies fought against that. All right? But they didn't win out on that one. Okay? So businesses are constantly trying to convince the government to do something or not to do something. All right? And government officials are trying their best to listen to everybody's cause for concern. All right? Because GM, they're telling people, they're like, hey, nobody's making them buy this car. We're going to make safe cars because that's a good business idea. Nobody would want to buy an unsafe car. Okay? They're trying to persuade them the entire way. Now, other than businesses, you also have trade associations and labor unions. You have trade associations and labor unions. That's wonderful. Okay? Sure. Business related. All right. Now, the UMWA is a good example, United Mine Workers of America. All right. What types of policies did, for example, can you think of that they worked to change? What is it? Child labor laws? What else? Safety conditions. Mines were not the safest places in the world. What is it? They had to change air quality measures there. Remember, they also used to take the canaries in the mines to make sure that there wasn't like any methane gas there. And if you knew the canary like stopped singing, you're like, oh God, we're in trouble. Yeah. Uh, Pay, right? Establishing a regular 8-hour workday, overtime where you get paid time and a half. All right. Those are all things that a lot of unions, labor unions, including the mining unions, help get enacted because they're like, hey, would a coal mine company do this stuff on their own? Would they pay you time and a half for anything more than 40 hours a week if they could get away with not doing it? Nope. Because how do we know the answer to that? Because they had opportunities to do it and they didn't. All right. Yeah, they paid them. If you remember, they paid them in company script. Okay. Right. That's the idea behind it. And so, look, labor unions are very active in trying to get those policies that way. Okay. And that's where we're going to stop for right now.